First of all, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Now, I promise you over the next 45 minutes, it is interactive. We are going to talk to each other because listening to me speak for 45 minutes is not very exciting. So we're going to talk to each other, and we're going to talk about change, what's our experience, what gets in the way, what are some of the challenges, what can we do about it, and so on. So we've got a few slides that will just keep us on track, but it's mainly the conversation in the room that's most important. So we want this to be relevant and useful, and walk away that we think, okay, I know what I can do next time I find myself in that situation. So as Dave mentioned, my name's Mark Fitzmaurice. I'm a trainer with Dale Carnegie. I've been doing that for 28 years. I've had the opportunity of working all over the world with organisations, but this is my favourite place back in the northwest of England. So I'm going to share some of my experiences in organisations that I've worked with and the kind of things that we've done to help them get through change in a more effective way, easier and faster. We're going to look at some simple things today. You've probably seen this before in different ways, but most of what we do is pretty simple to get and fairly straightforward to implement. And we want to start here with what we call the life cycle of change. And it starts up here, is what's the performance improvement or what are the results that we're trying to achieve. And if we don't focus on that when we start our change, we can end up down a dark alley. We've got to keep our eyes on the prize to say the reason we're making this change is to get to this place. What's the performance improvement or the desired culture or the results that we are aiming for. And then we've got to look at what are the different ways of working and the different behaviours that we need to get us there. So that's our starting point. Okay, what kind of things came up? Let's just hear from one or two groups. What kind of things are current? What's going on? Where do we see change? Who's got something?
We were talking about the expansion and diversification of the business and moving regional offices.
Yeah.
The challenges in that.
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have remote workers?
Yes.
Yeah, working remotely, right? Again, that can be a real challenge. Is how do you get people to feel engaged when they're away from the mothership? So that's a good example of how organisations are changing today. Is because of the state of our roads, organisations are wanting more people to work more flexibly, work from home, work remotely. Engaging them is a challenge. That's one example. Thank you. Somebody else?
This was rebranding corner.
Rebranding corner. Yeah. And again, doesn't that happen really quickly these days? If you get a rebrand in, how long does that last?
3 years on average.
Yeah, 3 years, and then we're going through the whole thing again. Just as we've got people to emotionally buy into the brand values, boom, it's gone, and we go again. And we see that so much in the marketplace currently.
The end point needs to be beneficial for all stakeholders, or you won't get buy-in from everybody.
Correct, and we've really got to think about that, because it might be if we're restructuring and some people are losing their job, we've got to look after the survivors and make sure that the survivors are clear. Here's why we're doing this, here's the benefit to us all. And we've got to think about not just what are we doing, but the why. I think people are really good at selling the what, but not so good at selling the why. So why do some people resist? Where does that come from?
Well, you said before, change is scary. They are particularly invested already in doing things a certain way, and they're worried potentially about how much effort they'll have to invest in changing how they do things, even if it long term will save them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole investing in effort is a good point. Yeah. Why else do people resist?
They feel insecure and vulnerable.
Yeah, they feel insecure and vulnerable. Are you saying that adults at work sometimes feel insecure and vulnerable? Can't believe that for a second. Right, of course they do. Why else do people resist? So we've talked about fear and insecurity. Why else?
They don't buy into the need for change because in their area they're quite happy with what they do and how they do it.
A bit like a no burning platform situation. You know, if you've read any of Kotter's books, he talks a lot about having create a burning platform in the organisation. And sometimes if people can't see it in their department, they don't see the problem. We've got to set the platform on fire a little bit and get people seeing, oh, this is really important, we need to change now, rather than, well, this doesn't affect me, it's everybody else. It's that old game of who feels our organisation needs to change? Yeah, me. Who feels they personally need to change? Oh no, that's not me. So it's just making sure that we've got that burning platform for individuals to say, this is critical. And we did it in fewer than 4 minutes. Yet a few minutes ago, we might have been thinking, that can't be done, it's not possible, don't ask me. What do we learn from that? Yes, sometimes things are. Now we can't say anything's possible, of course that's not true, but can you see that this is not a fact? In many cases, it's an opinion. And when we're going through change, we've got to expect this to come up. And can you see that how we react when that comes up is critical? If we get defensive or push people back or criticise people, we lose them. We've just got to understand that change is emotional and we are going to get emotional reactions. And the key is to embrace that and not see it as a problem. Is this happens during change. People just want to say, I'm really scared about this, but they don't use that word. They say, it's impossible, you're kidding. In reality, they're just scared or a bit insecure. So please be ready for this, and we've got to deal with it in the right way. If we push it back and we dismiss it, people just close down and we lose. Then we come to we will change. Now, the challenge is change is not just the job of the leadership team or the board or the executive committee or the heads of department. Can you see changes for all of us? And we've all got to do our bit to make it happen. So therefore what we're talking about here is personal responsibility. Now let's look at different kinds of responsibility. There's personal responsibility and conditional responsibility. So let's start with the top one. What's personal responsibility? There's a clue in the word.
You take ownership.
Yeah, it's mine. Ownership's a great word, Dev. Now, if people take personal responsibility during change, is that going to make things easier or more difficult? It's going to make it easier, isn't it? And then there's something called conditional responsibility. That's personal responsibility with conditions. So there's a little 2-letter word here called if. So conditional responsibility is, yes, I'll go through the change, yes, I'll do my bit, if. And then you can finish that for yourself. People's list of terms and conditions are extensive, and even if you satisfy them, they pull out another list, because it was never the conditions, it was the lack of personal responsibility. And then you get this word here, which is blame. I know that doesn't happen in our organisations, but what happens when we get into blame mode?
Finger pointing.
Right, finger pointing, yeah. Why do people do it? What are they trying to avoid?
Responsibility.
Any kind of responsibility. So blame is kind of an easy way out to stop me taking responsibility. And that's a good analogy for what happens in organisations that are going through change, is people say, something's not right here, somebody should be doing something about it. When in reality, if people look in the mirror honestly, there's loads that they can do to make their situation better. And we've got to again look at the leadership. Are we good at empowering? Are we good at giving people permission? Are we good at getting people to think for themselves? Otherwise, people just get stuck on the escalator and say, this is not working, somebody should be fixing it. Instead of, what can I do to make my situation better? So let's not get stuck on the escalator blaming other people for the fact that it's not working. Let's do the things that we can do to make it better. Get into the knowledge trap. I forgot to tell you, by the way, I won 36 million on Euro Millions last Friday. Sorry for not mentioning that. So on Saturday morning, about 4 or 5 days ago, I bought myself a 36-seater aeroplane, and it's sitting on the runway at Manchester Airport. Over the weekend, I watched the video on how to fly it, and I've read the handbook all the way through. Honestly, I know how to fly the aeroplane. I'm an expert on it. Anybody fancy a trip around Blackpool Tower at lunchtime? What's the difference?
Experience.
You've got the knowledge, but you might not have the ability.
Correct, right? Knowledge in itself is not enough. And just because we've told people what needs to happen doesn't mean it will. You know, you probably hear managers say, I've told them 3 times. Hello, telling them is just part of the equation. So we've got to get people into this last quote. I quote that famous management guru, Mr. Bruce Lee, and he said, knowing's not enough, we must apply. Willing's not enough, we must do. So when we get over here in the practice piece, again, what can get in the way? When we're asking people to try new things and behave in a different way and use a new system or embrace some new ways of working, how do they react?
Emotionally in the same way as before.
Emotionally, right, like we talked about a little bit earlier on. We're going to talk about comfort zone. What's that? Boring, yeah. It's where I feel safe, isn't it? So when people get on the edge of their comfort zone or outside, what's their reaction?
Fear.
Say again?
Fear.
Yeah, people get afraid. What do they want to do?
Go back in.
Yeah, they want to go back. It's a bit like hanging onto the branch. They want to go back to where they're safe. By the way, how does that fear show up?
Resistance.
Yeah, it's resistance, and we then give people a label to say, oh, you're a difficult person or a resistor. Actually, no, they're not. They're just scared. They just don't know how to express that. So most people's disruptive behaviour comes from fear or insecurity. Can you see this is not a choice? This is an emotional reaction when we're asking people to do things that they've not done before or they don't think they can do. Is they're going to be outside their comfort zone, and we will get emotional reactions.
Isn't that related to conditioning and mindset though?
Yeah.
Because I've got a team of people who are very high growth mindset,
Yeah.
and would have all been extremely excited
Yeah,
by
exactly.
that and actually want to be pushed
And
outside
are you
of
their
the comfort zone.
leader?
Absolutely.
And that's why, right? So if
Yeah.
you role model that and create that kind of environment in your organisation, that's when change is a lot easier.
Absolutely.
If every other organisation were like yours, we'd be out of business. Right? So most organisations aren't like that, but you can see what difference it makes when you've got a leader who engages, inspires, grows people, enables people, empowers people, is people will go for it in a much more powerful way. And in reality, that's sort of the point that they come back to, is our role, you know, as leaders, as coaches, as managers, is absolutely critical. We've got to create an environment where people will do this and not run away and not feel afraid.